I want to talk to you about rum runners and traders and all that stuff because that's a big part of who you are.
Oh, right.
But yeah, let's explain the tangas. Tungvas?
The Tungva.
Okay.
So, okay, like what we were saying was that, you know, everywhere in Los Angeles, I'm trying to, pick up, but everywhere in Los Angeles, the things that we walk by every day, this is all native land. And I mean, you have places like Grand Park and City Hall, street intersections like Main and Temple, which is
In downtown Los Angeles.
right, that significant things happen like in these areas. And or Los Angeles Street, we've talked about Los Angeles Street a lot. And these crazy huge things throughout Los Angeles history have happened here. And I think it's so important that we know these things. And I mean, especially like the first people, the first Angelinos, So,
Is that who they were, the Tungvas?
right, yeah. And I'm kind of getting into it a little bit, but yeah, during the Spanish period, we regarded them as the Gabrielinos because of the mission.
Wow.
So they didn't, the Spanish didn't really care, who they were or anything. They needed the labor. They needed, to convert these people because they were now part of the Spanish Empire. So you can't have, pagans in the empire. You had to have Catholics.
For those who don't know, a pagan is what?
They didn't want any other religion besides Catholic.
Okay.
So
You're considered a...
when they say pagan, it was more or less anything, almost anything, like other than Catholicism. Yeah.
So they saw them as just labor and convert them.
Yeah, and they call them you hear a lot gentes sin razón. And of course the Spanish were gentes con razón. And so they looked at these people as their children. And these children needed to be taught, and sometimes they needed to be disciplined. And so that created a huge issue, with these natives. And of course, with this colonialism, there's always going to be kind of like a whitewashing. There's always going to be, you can't speak your language. You can't perform your native dances or your rituals and things like that. You shouldn't be praising this certain god. Or a lot of the times what we see also with a lot of colonial powers, that god that you think of, that you with so-and-so name, oh no, that's actually Jesus. Like you've been praising Jesus. Yeah, you're good. So yeah, it's just
They try to interject their views and their...
And we've also talked about like the Virgin of Guadalupe and how she resembles an Aztec god or goddess, and even the colors, even like the color scheme on her and things like that, the symbols on her, like her like purple belt and things like that, and how it's a symbol of that she's with child and things like that. And so yeah, I mean there's definitely Spanish influence.
So, okay, so you're saying we should know what happened on Los Angeles Street and what happened in La Placita and all that. Like, I mean, give us a little, rundown. Like, what? I mean, I have no idea what happened.
Oh yeah, so I mean, of course, like all of California, Los Angeles goes through a few different periods, and you have for thousands and thousands of years, you have natives here, until the Spanish start to come in and colonize California. And, at that time, California is part of Mexico and New Spain. And so there's the Spanish period, and that's, how I said right now. And then after Mexico gains its independence, there's the Mexican period. And then Los Angeles goes through the American period after the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in the Mexican-American War. So, you have people in Los Angeles like Pio Pico, which was the last Mexican governor of Alta California. And somebody like him, he was born in Spanish California. He becomes, he goes through politics and things like that in the Mexican period. And then when the Americans take over California, you have the Americans asking Pio Pico to come to like the World's Fair and things like that to showcase old California. And, of course, I think there's like a letter in one, I think the Los Angeles Times or some, like one of these old newspapers where he's like, if those gringos think I'm going to go over there and show me like a show pony or something like that, they have another thing coming. And of course, like, so he's, saying flat out, like, pretty much get out of here. Like, I'm not going to be your showcase.
Pio Pico, you mentioned Pico Rivera, the city is named after him.
Yeah, so Pio Pico and Pico Rivera, the Pico family started to marry into like the Rivera family. And that's where we get the city of Pio Pico, or of Pico Rivera. But, that's kind of important too, like in history. And this is kind of where like the history becomes alive sometimes, where you start to see the history in the names of the city, the names of the streets and things like that. And I mean, like Azusa, Azusa is actually a name derived from a Tongva word, and it's Azuzana, and which, there's different translations to that word, and, they come a lot from like the American side, so it's not, we don't really know. Yeah. But, I mean, we have, what's that other... We have
Lucky Baldwin, right? Baldwin.
Oh, well, he was another founder.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that he had owned like thousands and thousands of acres, of land, right? I mean, he owned...
Well, early California, you have a lot of people coming into California just buying huge plots of land. And Lucky Baldwin was one of them. He was wealthy. He comes in because there was a lot of money here, at those times. And he buys, Rancho, I think, what was it called? Rancho Arcadia or something like that. Okay. And, it takes like all of Monroe. His ranch was huge. I think it went all the way to like Baldwin Park or something like that. And same with Pio Pico, like that Whittier area. He owned all of Whittier, all of, Pico Rivera. And his mansion is still there. His adobe mansion is still in Whittier, so people can still go and see it. But yeah, Lucky Baldwin was just another kind of founder, another big player in early California. And you see him, it's just kind of crazy to see where Arcadia is now, because that's not what he would have pushed for.
Oh, wow.
He was a big gambler, big drinker, big smoker, you know. So like everybody knew when Lucky Baldwin, if he created a city, it would have been like a mini Las Vegas. Wow. Yeah, so, and that's where we get the racetrack, you know, like he had a racetrack before this racetrack. Wow. And, you know, he was doing exactly that. And what really made Arcadia, though, was the railroad. The railroad went through Monrovia, so it almost had to go through Arcadia. And that's how Arcadia really became a city. Wow. Yeah, so the railroad had so much, and especially in this area, farming and agriculture and the railroad.
And what years are we talking?
I believe it's the late 1800s. Okay. Yeah. And actually he gets his name, Lucky Baldwin. He goes to India and he tells his assistant to sell his stocks. He accidentally takes his key from his safe and the assistant's not able to take it out. When he comes back, the stocks grew, and pretty much he made a ton of money. Wow. And so that's where Lucky Baldwin comes.
Very interesting.
And another little fun fact, we were talking about this. I'm full of fun facts, you know. But when you go around Arcadia, you know, this whole area, you know, you will sometimes run into peacocks.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And that's directly from Lucky Baldwin. When he was in India, he brought back a peacock. I think it was a peacock and a peahen. And yeah. And so all of the peacocks we see now are from Lucky Baldwin's initial 2 peacocks that he brought over. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all over Arcadia, and you know, the Arboretum. It's a big. Actually, it's the bird of Arcadia. It's on all the streets.
Right. It's on the street. It's on. You know, they have statues at the parks and stuff.
Super interesting. Yeah, I think that like, you know, I've lived in Arcadia a good chunk of my life, and you don't get taught the history of it. Right. You know, like you don't unless you learn it. Like, is that a class that you took or is that research that you did?
That's more or less research that I did. Yeah, because I mean, even in these colleges, even, you know, at PCC, there's no class of like Pasadena history or, I mean, usually it's generalized. It's LA, you know. Yeah. And if they, you know, some schools don't really have like LA history. It would be more or less like California history and then you have certain teachers that kind of zoom in into certain locations, but it's more or less like where they grew up, you know. I mean, like anybody, you know, you're going to tell your personal story. You're going to, yeah.
Let's get into Rum Runners, and let's get into like, you know, how you got into the whole sailor thing and pirates, and because it's a big part of who you are. You know, you're a sailor, right? A Navy man.
Yeah, so for the most part,
you got your skull and bones over there.
That's right. Yeah, always been interested in maritime history and piracy for the most part. And I think that's...
And maritime, for those who are not history buffs, is...
like nautical history, ships and things like that. Yeah, navigation. Okay. And, you know, so much comes out of like merchant sailing and I mean
travel. The first people, the first peoples that began to travel through water, right, on ships and stuff like that. They say that was it the Samoans?
I honestly feel like
Vikings were traveling.
The Polynesians were traveling.
The Polynesians, I meant.
Yeah, so I mean,
what got you into it though?
You know, it was always that history. It was always, I think more or less my first history lesson was like on World War II. And, you know, I was enthralled, but I don't know what it was. I don't know what the initial what the initial thing was,
Yeah.
but I always was interested in piracy, always interested in like old ships and things like that. And I remember when the Pirates of the Caribbean movie started to come out. I was like in junior high. You know, I was enthralled, and that kind of like pushed me even further to look into the history and things like that of like Henry Morgan or Captain Morgan or Captain Kidd. You know, Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny, Mary Read, and all these, you know, huge, notorious pirates and privateers. So yeah, that's always been a huge fascination of mine. But yeah, that's...
Do you think it's something about the way they were living? You know, the pirates, the way that they...
Definitely. I mean, when you research these things, you had to be... for a pirate or a privateer, you know, you had to be brave. It was a life of like freedom. It was a life of adventure. And, you know, some stories like Captain Morgan, you know, the stories and the things you hear about pirates, I mean, they fall like, that's exactly what you're getting with his history or Blackbeard's history, you know. There's these pirates that, you know, the intense bravery, the intense cruelty, you know. Yeah, like all those horror stories, all those stories of adventure, they're there, you know. You just kind of have to look for them because, I mean, just knowing about Captain Morgan, you know, like you're really not gonna, like just seeing the bottle of rum, you know, you're really not going to get the history of who this man really was.
Why are they associated with rum specifically, the pirates?
That is because, I mean, there was a lot of like smuggling wine. There was smuggling, you know, it's really more or less like the piracy that we study a lot mostly is during the golden age of piracy. And a lot of them were in the Caribbean at that time. And so for the most part, what the alcohol of choice in that area is rum, you know. But, you know, you go to different locations and, you know, they're producing some other type of alcohol, you know. I mean, yeah, every place has their own.
So were the Rum Runners, those guys, is that related to the pirates, those Rum Runners, or is that...
It can be like some were smuggling in rum, you know, some were merchants, but it has a lot to do with piracy because a lot of the times they would wait in coves in different things and they would wait for these merchant ships because that's how they got their rum, that's how they got their food, that's how they got, you know, their wealth. And so, yeah, I think it has definitely a lot to do with piracy. Wow. Yeah. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I think that all of it adds to like our perspective in life. You know how like traveling, you know, I know you've been big on travel and you come back and it's like the food here and the culture here and the music here, you know, and you love Hawaii, right? And so that's yeah, who doesn't? But you go beyond just traveling to the place. You're going into it and you're trying to get into their culture, which I think is so cool.
That I feel like my biggest thing is like you come out with something